And so let's break this down first by looking at what poop should look like, what is normal and what is abnormal, because I've actually had people come to see me where they said, hey, you know what, my bowels are regular, I'll go on a regular basis, and then we get in more of a depth of the conversation, actually realize that their whole life they've been constipated, and because constipation was that person's normal, they didn't even realize it was constipation. So what we're looking at here is a kind of an example of what's known as the Bristol Stool Chart, which just kind of classifies stools in 7 different ways. So you can see up here on the top, type 1, these are separate, hard, small lumps. Some people refer to these as rabbit turds. So if you've ever referred to your bowel movement as a rabbit turd, this is type 1. This is a form of constipation. Then we have type 2, which is lumpy, sausage-like. This is a milder form of constipation. Again, you have, it's kind of like a conglomeration of these smaller rabbit turds connected together, but still hard to come out and still abnormally shaped. Then we have type 3, which is your sausage-shaped traditional stool. This is actually a normal stool, so it's like that log sausage-shaped stool that many people have. And then we have type 4. So type 3 and type 4, we would call these both normal. All right, everything else is abnormal. And this is kind of like the long, smooth, soft sausage or banana-shaped stool with well-formed edges. Then we start getting more kind of into the diarrhea section, right? So this is, looser bowels, if you will. Type 5 are soft blobs with no clear edges. This is oftentimes a sign of not enough fiber in the diet, but we'll talk in more depth here in just a minute. And then we get the type 6, which is more of your mushy consistency with ragged edges, but there's still some form or shape. This is kind of a milder version of diarrhea. And if you've just got full-blown liquid, no solid pieces, okay, this is diarrhea. So, where we do generally tend to see this full-blown severity is things like infection. So if you've got a gut bug, a viral bug in the GI tract, or an intestinal infection like bacteria, if you've got something like celiac disease or Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, an inflammatory bowel disease, typically it's going to manifest more as this persistent chronic diarrhea. So those are, again, kind of just think of those as ways that we classify stools. So when you're looking in the toilet, I know, again, a lot of you may be kind of embarrassed by even the thought of that, but it's really important that you understand that when you are going to the bathroom, it's important to observe what your bowels are doing. Sometimes we see blood in the stool. Sometimes we can see abnormal digestive foods, etc., things coming out whole, not being digested. Like, these are insights and clues as to the robustness of your GI tract and the health of your GI tract. So, it's not a bad idea to look at your poop. And if you've got kids, it's not a bad idea to look at their poop now and again, and make sure that there's no major issues or problems. So let's look at some of the, I'm going to switch over to constipation here. So this table, I pulled this one out of the journal Medicine. So this is just, again, this is a big review of this common causes of constipation. I just want to make sure you're aware of. So again, if you've got Bristol's types 1 and 2, going back to this chart, right? If you're here or you're here, you're constipated. So if that's you on a regular basis, pay close attention to this next part. These are, again, common causes of constipation. So they're different types, but one of the most common is a slow transit. So slow bowel transit. There's actually a number of different situations that can cause a slower transit time, meaning when you eat your food, it takes longer to move through your GI tract, and so that food, as it sits in your bowel, stays there longer, becomes more concentrated, and constipation. So one of the most common causes of slow transit is stress. Now, on the opposite side of this, one of the most common causes of fast transit is also stress. In essence, stress can impact different people's GI tracts in different ways, and oftentimes they're paradoxical, meaning we would think, well, if stress can cause constipation, it can also cause diarrhea, right? In opposite ways. But slow transit and stress, highly related. Then we have, moving down the list, there's a number of different things down here that are lifestyle oriented. So one of them is immobility, and so this could be like lying in bed all day, bed rest. Lack of movement, lack of exercise, lack of mobility is very conducive to constipation. And one of the reasons why is a lot of the nerves that feed the bowel and feed the peristalsis waves of your GI tract to move through you is the actual activity, is exercise. So when you don't exercise, remember the same muscles that are fed, that are rather the same nerves that feed your intestines are the same nerves that feed your hips, your legs, your low back. And so, one of the common, very, very common ways that we can help a person with constipation if they're not doing it is just squatting. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of these squatty potties, right? Where they're special stools that put you in a squat-like position to have a bowel movement when you're constipated, because it actually helps with the flow of the movement itself. But the act of physically squatting, and not squatting down on the seat, but actually squatting, the exercise squatting, can be very helpful to stimulate the nerves that help your bowels, the motility of your bowels. So think of it as, if you struggle every day and you try to get up and you have a bowel movement and you can't, consider doing some squats. You don't need weight, just some air squats. And consider also doing some back bends where you just bend over, touch your toes several times in a row, and get things moving physically, because sometimes that physical movement triggers a neurological movement to feed into your GI tract. So again, immobility, bed rest. If you've been down in your bed because you had a cold or a flu, or you've been down in your bed because you've had a backache, a lot of times constipation is a natural progression the longer you're on bed rest. This is why, again, if you've ever been in a hospital, constipation is a common problem in hospitals for this reason. Most of the patients are immobile, sitting in a bed. Overuse of laxatives. So if you've got a history of using laxatives, and there are a lot of different over-the-counter laxatives. There are different, teas. Some people use coffee because coffee can be a natural laxative. The caffeine can stimulate a bowel movement, as so can some of the plant-based ingredients in the coffee itself. So overuse of laxatives, though, over time, the more and more you tend to rely on laxatives to have a bowel movement, the more and more you basically detrain your bowels to properly function. So over time, as your bowels, they don't know when to go, when not to go, and you have to actually stimulate them with a laxative. A low fiber diet. Now, there's different kinds of fiber, so I wanted to point out that there's soluble fiber and there's insoluble fiber. And where we want, if we're talking about, sometimes people say eat more fiber and you'll have a better bowel movement. And the problem with that is many of you might have an issue with FODMAPs. So if you're on a low FODMAP diet, a lot of the foods that contain higher fiber also contain FODMAPs. So this could actually make the problem worse, in that it can create increases in gas and bloating and continued constipation. So be careful if you've ever been diagnosed as being somebody who needs to be on a low FODMAP diet. And this insoluble fiber is a very bad idea. Again, insoluble fiber, what is that? That's for many of you, is going to be like cereal fibers. So like bran would be a classic example of an insoluble fiber. You can't really break it down or digest it. It just adds bulk to the stool. But when you add bulk to the stool and you have a FODMAP problem, what happens is things are already slowed down. Now you've added this additional source of insoluble or non-digestible material, and you're already struggling to digest things, and so now it just creates a lot of gas and bloating and problems. So if we're talking about adding fiber to your diet, you want soluble fiber that's soluble, that will break down. And so the classic example of soluble fiber is psyllium. So if you ever heard of psyllium or psyllium husk fiber, this is a type of soluble fiber that can work really, really well if you have a low fiber diet and you're trying to find a way to get more fiber into it to help your bowel movements. As I mentioned here with immobility, sedentary lifestyle. So, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you go to work and work at a desk for 7-8 hours a day, and you're sitting for the vast majority of the time, right? That's sedentary lifestyle. I mean, it's very hard to offset 7 to 8 hours of sitting with a 30-minute workout routine in the morning, which is what most people try to do. This is one of the reasons why one of the best pieces of advice I can give you if you have a desk job is get a desk treadmill. A desk treadmill, in essence, don't sit all day, walk some of your day. Actually, I do this personally, and I walk anywhere from 5 to 8 miles a day. just because I don't want to sit and have a sedentary lifestyle, and because I don't have another option, right? It's not like, you go to work, you go to work, you've got to do your job. And again, if your job is computer oriented, then you could be running into this problem. And even if you exercise regularly, it might not be enough to offset the quantity of time that you're sitting. So a desk treadmill, or scheduled regular breaks throughout the day where you can get up, do some toe touches, do some some trunk twists, some jumping jacks, whatever it takes to keep your body moving and to prevent that sedentarianism from setting in and creating a problem. Ignoring the urge to defecate. This is a big one because this sets up a neurological problem. So some people hold it, right? You have a kid and you're in the car and your dad or your mom says, you got to hold it and you got 4 hours to go. Not a good idea. Holding it is actually a bad idea. What it does is it bypasses. So when your brain is receiving a message that you have to go to the bathroom, it's time to listen to that message. And if you hold it, what you're really doing is you're suppressing that neurological message that can lead to long-term chronic constipation types of issues. Inadequate fluid intake. Now, we all hear about water, and I actually talked about water not very long ago. We talked about the importance and the quantity of water to take in. But inadequate fluid overall. Now remember, if you're eating real food, and a lot of people today in today's world don't eat real food. What do they eat? They eat processed junk food that's in packages, and so it's really most of that type of food is devoid of any great water content. But fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, that kind of thing, most of the content of those foods is water. So you're getting a lot of water when you're eating real food. So it's not a matter of drinking, a gallon of water every day, which is what some people think they have to do when they're constipated, and it doesn't work because it's not the problem, but it can be. So you do want to make sure you're getting adequate fluid intake. And so as a general rule of thumb, again, as a general rule of thumb to prevent dehydration, make sure you're getting anywhere from 30 to 50 ounces of water a day as kind of a bare bones minimum. And again, if you eat food that's real food, this should be very easily achievable without you having to feel like you got to run back and forth to the bathroom to pee all day long. Because remember, water is important for that too, but it's important for your bowel function. Changes in your routine, very common cause of constipation. So if you've had a recent job change, a recent move, if you're, kids oftentimes when they change teachers or they change classrooms or you go on vacation and your environment changes and it's distinctly different. Changes in routine can create problems here as well, constipation problems, but changes in your daily routine as well. So let's say that you're used to a 9 to 5, but then you got put on shift work, and so now you're going into work at noon and you're working until 8. Like a change in routine in that way as well could also create kind of a trend toward constipation. Now this is the third time we're seeing physical activity, right? Immobility, sedentary lifestyle, and then lack of regular exercise, all super important. Basically the same thing, right? Which is use it or lose it. Get up and move if you want to have a movement, right? So move to have a movement. Stress is a major player. As I mentioned up here, one of the problems with stress is it can either really slow down your transit or can really speed up your transit. And one of the reasons why is, remember what stress does. Stress turns on the sympathetic nervous system. And remember, for your bowel to function, sympathetic is fight or flight. This is the part of your nervous system that gets you ready to run away or have a fight, right? So it's the amped up version of your nervous system. When you're in this mode, when you're worried or nervous, your body's not thinking about bowel movements and digestion and rest. It's thinking about what can it do to fight or run. So this is not good. So when you're under chronic stress, that chronic stress activates and increases sympathetic tone. We want to increase parasympathetic tone. And the way we can do that, there are a lot of different things that we can do to do that. And one of them is to find and identify the major sources of stress in your life, whether that be people, whether that be things at work or things in your job or in your work, whether that be environmental situations that you're in that haven't been resolved. Like this is a major issue for many of you. This past year for many of you has been a major stress bomb. And so that in and of itself is enough to create and increase sympathetic tone, shutting off parasympathetic nervous system. Remember, parasympathetic nervous system is how we poop. So anything we can do to enhance it, to improve it, and to allow it to function on a regular basis. What is that? That's the proper amount of sleep. It's exercise, it's sunshine, it's eating clean food, it's keeping your body healthy, right, as a general rule of thumb. And so how do we de-stress when we're under tremendous amounts of stress? We prioritize our life, and we prioritize the things in our life around that. So again, stress is major. Now, pregnancy is a cause of constipation. This is a tough one because this is more of a physical cause. This is not, with pregnancy, it's more of a physical pressure being put in on the intestine, so it can create that constipation. It's not like a pregnant woman is doing something wrong per se, although a pregnant woman could be stressed and could have lack of exercise and a low fiber diet, etc. But pregnancy in and of itself is generally speaking is a physical issue. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.